For all the work we've done, right, there's still more work to do. And I think that's an obvious overstatement. But the thing is, you know, we've not yet been alive. Well, I haven't been alive 50 years yet. And, you know, I mean, I feel like to a certain extent our generation is starting over.
Starting over
In this whole struggle piece, right? And I know that's not technically true, but I know that I've had conversations with older black men, my uncles who are in their 80s, deacons at the church. And in some way, shape, or form, in these particular conversations, they have said, we appreciate the work you're doing, and we have to apologize to you. I'm like, what do you mean apologize? And their apology really is, we thought we won in like 1965 with the Voting Rights Act, right? We thought we won, you know, in the 70s when we were able to go to these colleges and get jobs at Goldman Sachs.
right.
And even though we saw all this other stuff, you know, we had a modicum of economic achievement, and so the recession of the 80s didn't really hit us like it hit everybody else. And we didn't see that because we didn't live with everybody else. Right? So they had this kind of separation economically and culturally.
Yes.
And then didn't, in their minds, prepare my generation of cousins or young men at the church at the time to be in struggle and engaged in sustained struggle, you know, from the time that they were in their teens and 20s. So it feels like there's a gap in knowledge, is what I mean by starting over. So you've got a generation that doesn't have any connection, you know, ideologically or even politically in many ways to what happened in the mid 20th century. And so they're having to relearn. And I feel like our work is trying to bridge that gap.
Yes.
Because of how we deal with history and culture in our work. But it's like we're teaching 101 all the time. So that's what I mean by starting.
Totally. I know for me, I hate writing the same thing twice.
Yeah.
And so I said what I said, I wrote what I wrote, and I need you to go read that so that we can go build something now.
Yeah.
And until you do that, we can't build. We can't build. I can build, but we can't build.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you know, what those elders, you know, are apologizing for is 100% valid. Right? They, you know, without being disrespectful, they owe us that apology.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I say us because, like, I know my generation precedes yours briefly, and we were already losing those lessons in my lifetime, right? But I mean, setting that aside, right? We were always going to need to do the re-education piece, always. You know, if you don't, if your history is not a priority, and we do not prioritize it.
America writ large, let alone Black America.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And it's one thing for, you know, when I say that, it sounds like I'm blaming us. And there's a level of that. But the larger piece of it, obviously, is that we're being erased anyway. So we are kind of going, you know, uphill to begin with, right? We're fighting erasure to get to the part where I get to tell you some level 101 stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. It's not to cast blame. Like, I absolutely agree with you. I think I could cast blame more readily if folks understood how important history was. Right? But I mean, this whole critical race theory thing just goes to show that few people in America really understand what history is and how important it is, right? John Henry Clark said education is the way we learn who we are, where we are, connected to land, connected to God, and connected to people, right? And that, if you don't have that historic foundation, land, God, people, then you're lost. You're not a people, right? And so there's I think, a valid argument to say that since the mass incarceration, school to prison pipeline phenomenon, of the 70s into the 80s, crack,
Right.
everything that happened that decimated generations, right? 80s is the first time where, I mean, in modern history, this happened obviously during slavery and things like that. This is the first time where you had 22-year-old grandparents almost. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but not that much, right? And so you have a whole gap in knowledge, in beingness, in engaging. Because if I'm having a kid at 15, that's prime time to be out in the streets fighting. Like the civil rights segment where the youth, the teens, started filling the jails. They were 14, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, right? Then, you know, King was in his late 20s, 30s. I mean, these cats died at 40. Right? And we've got a whole generation or two of folks who are grandparents before 30, before 40 rather, right? So you don't have time to be politically active and engaged. You don't have time to read no history books because you're dealing with life. And I think that in many ways, not to be a conspiracy theorist or anything that I can't prove, I think I can, but I think that was politically expedient, if not planned, because it took a whole generation or two out of the game, right? And now you have this new awakening. I mean, we were there in the 90s, right? We had consciousness, we had Malcolm X hats and posse patches and all those kinds of things, but it never evolved to the next phase because everything got cut off by 9/11. And it kind of happened a little before that.
Well,
but I mean, you see these cultural shifts that abruptly brings these things to an end. And then we had to grow up and get jobs.
Yeah.
You know, it's weird how without that cultural center that knowledge of history brings, we have to keep starting and stopping, starting and stopping.
Well, I mean, you know, look, any movement that does not feed you will fail in a discussion. Now, we can define feed literally, which, you know, is real, or we can define it as job, right? Or shelter. But if your movement isn't addressing those things, we're never going to get to the good parts, right? We're never going to get to the history part. We're never going to get to the culture piece. We're just not going to get to those pieces. And so, you know, it's funny, like when I was coming up, you know, in my extremely activist days in the 90s, you know, like back then, like, you know, Afrocentricity was on the cover of Time magazine.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
It was a thing.
It was the movement for real. And so the medallions was real. Hip hop
Asante was a hero.
Oh, totally. You know, and then now it's as if he didn't exist.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
That movement failed because we couldn't figure out, first of all, because Afrocentricity isn't that kind of movement. But second of all, because we couldn't figure out how to feed people with it. You know, so we were going into communities like, yo, you know, pork is killing you, the police are killing you, schools is killing you, da 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 da.
Yeah.
And people
and
are like, yo,
offering the counter.
they're like, yo, I gotta eat. What do you want me to do? I got to eat. What do you want me to do with that?
But I think, so, perfect. I think that's why your work and my work is coming out of our art that led to a Streetlight Guild, that led to a body of work like the 400, that connects, you know, the ephemeral, esoteric, artistic creator ideas, right? Ideas of like how to draw inspiration from those kind of points in history, that sense of beingness, and put it into a functional form. Right? This is how you do it. Streetlight Guild. Right? This is a path to understand it. 400. Text without context is pretext. Right? A lot of what we were dealing with, I think, in the 90s was text without context. Right?
That's fair.
We got a lot out of hip hop. I learned about Malcolm X. I mean, I had it in the environment, but I didn't pay attention until I heard somebody rapping about it. You know, I was a jazz musician in the 90s, but the fact that I heard it in hip hop made it even that much more hip to me, even though everybody else thought I was just a blur.
Right.
You know what I mean? But to your point, those Afrocentric ideas that we were kind of holding on to generate maybe at that point a false identity because it wasn't really real and authentic for us, didn't put food on the table, and it didn't offer a path to nation. You know, KRS-One always talks about that. The nation starts with the family. And nothing I was reading about Afrocentricity and you know, Hotep, brother, what's going on, was about family like that. It wasn't that
all of that had
at
to
that
be
time.
inferred.
You know,
Right.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And so I think what we have tried to do as we've evolved as artists is show how to do. Not just the artwork, but the hard work of building.
Yeah, and I will tell you, like, I thought about that the entire time. Like, when I was building Streetlight Guild, and I was like, I need this to operate. I need this building to operate like a movement, and to do that, like, one very simple thing, right? You know, you have to feed, right? And so everybody that came in here, I was like, I have to pay you. They're like, nah, I want to do that. No, I have to pay you. No, well, you know, I was going to do it anyway. I have to pay you.
I'm guilty of that.
I know. And it's like, I need you
It's the principle.
I need you to take it, because that has, you know, we're talking about the circulating dollar and resource building and all of that. It's not going to make you wealthy. But the concept, I need you to take that concept everywhere else you go.
Yeah, it's cooperative economics. And we have to practice it somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, and to the point about what's gotten better or not, I don't think that things have gotten better on the whole in Columbus.
Sure.
For people of color in general, black people specifically.
Right. I don't know anybody who would make that case.
No, and if you are, you're full of shit.
Yeah.
Because what I think, and I'm in a lot of these phone calls and meetings, and I think it's actually gotten worse because we've lost that sense of communal identity. And I remember being at a Scott Wood show. I remember, even if I wasn't part of the performance, I remembered that sense of community at a Snaps and Taps when Scott Woods did a reading. I remember people coming to Columbus Museum of Art for Fusion. You remember that?
Oh yeah, poetic fusion. Yeah.
And having that sense of community, right? I don't know, and I thought that we were going to build and grow from that very beautiful thing, right? And I don't know that we have that sense of community that really grew out of the seeds that were planted at that time, you know? I think that was very fertile soil. But I hear a lot of people who are of the age to have been there talk about that time, and they're on this me thing, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I get it. We all got to eat individually, but what sense does it make for me to eat and not you? I think we've lost that, and because we've lost that, there's a lot we could blame on downtown. There's a lot we could blame on the partnership. There's a lot we could blame on white power brokers. There's a lot of blame to go around.
Right.
But the fact that we lost that or didn't reclaim it, I think that's on us.
It is. I certainly think that the artists and the organizers and the producers of events that were for us, by us, we certainly had the wherewithal to see what we were and were not doing. We chose to do something else. I think that there are elements of our community, particularly our creative and cultural and artistic community, that are trying on some level to bring that back. But I think that a lot of it is still coming from that place, that me place, right? And I'm like, look, I'm here to tell you, that's not the move, right? That's not the move. I know it feels like the move, right? You're getting some things, you're getting some you're getting press you never got before. You know, you're getting resources you never got before, but you have to keep drilling that back into the pot.
Yeah, we have to be salmon. We have to, if we're really going to push to bring that us back, then we have to swim against the current. We have to swim upstream. Because if you're going downstream, you are getting the benefits of being downstream, but you're not building anything that's sustainable.
In all fairness, when Snaps and Taps is around, and it's so telling that we were talking about this today when that article just dropped.
That's right, that's right.
But it was the only place to go.
That's true.
Like it was almost, not almost, it was segregation all over again. Right? So it's like, oh, I guess we're all going to build a black business now. You know, it's like, it was like, how do you get Black Wall Street? Segregation.
Well, there's a lot to be said about that, right? When you have been harmed, you don't, let's say, harmed in battle, you don't heal while you're fighting, right? You have to go off alone, away from the fight, and heal, right? And as a community, black community in Columbus, I mean, this is true all over, but I mean, we're talking about Columbus. You know, I think segregation is healthy to a certain extent, in as much as we can be segregated, right? Because even that's a limited scope in terms of how much we can pull ourselves away from the majority culture and heal and come back whole and engage with the strength that comes from being whole.
I think we're supposed to be calling it self-sufficiency.
Oh, is that what it is again?
Yes. It looks like segregation, but I think it has a different title.
But if you read all the books, Mersha Bardaran's Color of Money, Richard Rothstein's The Color of Law, I mean, all these books show why we've not been successful when we've tried to assimilate, you know? And it's not that I'm opposed to being integrated, right? I don't care that my neighbor is European American on one side and Nepali on the other side, and from India, Indian American across the street, and Mexican next to them. That doesn't bother me. When I talk about like that kind of segregation that brings about some kind of holistic sense of who we are, it's about how we act consciously, right? To your point, how are we spending our money? How are we spending our time, right? My Mexican neighbors know that they're Mexican, full stop. That doesn't change if they're downtown in a boardroom. It doesn't change if they're at La Mexicana. You know what I mean? Like, they're gonna be Mexican, they're gonna be Mexican. We're not like that because we've not found that space for us to heal and grow. And I think, again, like Snap's Streetlight, just to kind of bring it back to how your art has been put into a place that's very functional, literal place, can be that.
Well, you know, the thing that we keep letting slide off the plate when we talk about integration is that we are constantly trying to integrate into something that is still trying to destroy us.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, segregation gets a bad rap, is what I'm saying. I'm sorry, self-sufficiency.
But I say, I agree, absolutely. And I say all the time that the country, the city, the world can't heal until we as artists show the world how to heal.
Agreed.
And that comes down even to the microcosm of Black Columbus.
Absolutely.
You know, and so part of the issue as it relates to how we get better is we've got to figure out how to do a better job of promoting what it is we do. So people understand that they can come and get exposed to vibrations that help them be better.
I think it will be interesting to see what happens in about 10 years. And we see what happens with the children who are coming up who no longer have the excuse that they did not have representation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like they were able to see us in movies, music, books, best-selling authors live here that are black. You know, it's like you are surrounded by that. I'm kind of curious. I can't wait to see what that generation looks like that doesn't have that to claim.